Welcome back and thank you for staying with us. Now, tonight we tell you about a humanitarian organization called Love Without Reason that has made it its business to restore smiles and beauty to patients with craniofacial deformities globally, in turn rescuing them from human trafficking.
They say beauty lies in the eyes of the beholder, but it is a story rigged with pain for those born with facial deformities in the form of cleft lips and palates, for towards them, the beholder might have well become the killer.
Children born with craniofacial birth defects are not allowed to live. Many are killed at childbirth. If they are lucky to be born alive, they are thrown into the garbage. Some are thrown on railway tracks.
The beholder may have also become the forsaker, discriminator, and abuser.
Oh, she is now 3 years, 2 months. But I used to struggle because always, if I always walk through the road, even with my neighbors, they always ask me, what about this? What was this? They always ask me.
It is a horrible life. Most people are considered to be a curse. They're ostracized, they're humiliated, isolated. They're not allowed to go to schools. They're not allowed to get jobs. Many do not get married, and they end up lonely.
A trauma hitting hardest for those born with the craniofacial anomalies in developing countries, where poverty and cultural beliefs make it even more difficult to fit in any niche of society, from childhood, school, work, and even marriage.
At school, other kids used to laugh at me to an extent that I decided not to go to school. And I went back home and I told my father that I no longer want to go back to school because other kids are laughing at me. And my father went to the school to see the headmaster so that he can beat or he can discipline other kids not to laugh at me, but nothing happened till this day. They were just laughing at me.
So as these things happen, what happens is the child is uneducated, does not have a job, cannot get married, okay, and a burden to the family. And what happens is the family sells these children. And these children are sold for bonded labor. Sometimes they're sold for beggary. They go out on the streets and beg for food. Many of these children are sold for their organs. There's an organ trafficking, organ harvesting industry that is going on. So what happens is they sell them for their hearts, their kidney, their lungs, different parts of their body, because their face is messed up, but the rest of the body is fine. They sell them for their organs.
As if that is not enough torment, a patient stands to lose more than just standard beauty, as Dr. Satish, a craniofacial surgeon, explains.
Palate should be corrected at the right age because there is a more chances of babies developing a defective speech. Correcting the defective speech is much so difficult, but I can say it is almost 50 to 60%.
A child born with a cleft palate is a major problem in terms of feeding. Okay, when a child is fed milk, either breastfed or bottle fed, the milk sometimes will go through the other channels, could enter the lungs, it could cause pneumonia, it would come back through the nose, cause a lot of discomfort. These children will not be able to feed. So a lot of them end up malnourished. Okay, and because they end up malnourished, eventually some of them will die. So that is a significant problem. It's a vicious cycle because they can't feed, they are malnourished, and because they're malnourished, they don't have enough weight, and because they don't have enough weight, they can't get the surgery done, and the cycle continues, you see?
But what in the world could be the cause of the craniofacial anomalies that have subjected so many people in the world to nothing but pain and stigma?
There are some other doctors that would say that these children are born because of herbal medication given or the wrong medication given. It could possibly be different things like that. I've even had doctors say that it could be because of maybe the chemicals mixed in the waters. So there are so many factors why these children are born like that. But basically, in the womb, the face needs to be formed. It comes from two different angles and it forms. And the non-closure of the face at the end of that term is what causes the cleft.
Restoration of beauty, smiles, speech, and confidence, among other things, to the patient is almost a lost cause, as corrective surgeries, which go up to 100 for complete restoration, could be unaffordable for people living below the poverty mark, and lack of well-trained craniofacial surgeons that could easily exacerbate the situation.
When the palate is fixed, if it is not done by a good surgeon, a reputed surgeon, somebody who understands what he or she is doing, then the child may never speak. So it has to be done very carefully. Palate surgeries are not easy. Most people don't do palate surgeries because, first of all, there is no market value for that, if you know what I mean. You know, you have a child with a cleft lip and a cleft palate, you take before pictures, after pictures. There is, there's some publicity that can be done with it. But with the palate, nobody does that, so it becomes a major problem. A lot of children have cleft lips repaired, but not their palates. One is there are not enough qualified, really good surgeons who do the cleft palate thing. Second is most organizations don't care.
However, amid all that struggle to look wanted, to be able to speak, smile, or generally fit in society, beauty might have well found itself in the corridors of Love Without Reason, an organization which is neck-bent on making the world cleft-free through fixing the facial anomalies.
Whether they are male or female, it doesn't matter. Whether they are rich or poor, it doesn't matter. Whether it is, how old they are, it does not matter. We just know that these people need the surgery and we are ready to do it for them.
The organization has so far conducted 400 plus cost-free surgeries in over 50 camps in India and Africa, and for those that have been fixed, the smile is worth showing.
Love Without Reason. I just want to thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for helping our son.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Love Without Reason, for giving new life like others.
It's still a journey of bruises and burns for patients who have not yet met the restorer of their faces. But hope still abounds, as Love Without Reason will not stop until all faces are fixed. Daphne Orina for KUTV.
Well, earlier we had a discussion with the CEO and founder of Love Without Reason, Dr. Santosh Matthews, concerning craniofacial anomalies, and this is what transpired. Good evening and welcome to tonight's special segment of health, where we are going to decipher craniofacial anomalies, and helping me to decipher that topic is Santosh Matthews, who's the CEO and founder of Love Without Reason, an organization which has come to help people with such deformities. Thank you very much, Santosh Matthews, for having us.
Thank you, Daphne.
Perhaps to start with you introducing yourself and tell our viewers who you are and what you do and the name of your organization.
Okay, so my name is Santosh Matthews. I'm the CEO, founder, and the president of Love Without Reason. So Love Without Reason is an organization that was established in the US in 2007. So we are in the fight against human trafficking and also do craniofacial surgeries. So that's how we began. And we started doing surgeries in India, in Zimbabwe, in Uganda, and now we are also in Kenya.
Okay, you mentioned craniofacial defects and surgeries. Perhaps if you could tell us what some of them are and what causes them.
So craniofacial surgeries is what we call anything neck and above. Okay, so these surgeries could happen for patients that have had trauma, like they get into an accident, and then they can, injure their faces, and then they get into trauma. Some of these surgeries are done for patients that are born with these deformities. It could be a cleft lip or a cleft palate. There are children with big heads, hydrocephalus, spina bifida. All those kind of cases also fit into the craniofacial surgery group. Okay. It can involve, it's mostly the skull and the bony structure also that is involved in those craniofacial surgeries. Okay, so it's a wide-ranging area, but Love Without Reason in Africa decided to bring it down to just focus on cleft lip and cleft palate. Okay. So the cleft lip is where a child or a person is born with an open lip. Okay, they have many words in different countries for it, but the official name is cleft lip. And then cleft palate is the opening in the roof of the mouth. Okay, and a cleft lip, there are several different types. There is a bilateral cleft lip. There is a unilateral cleft lip. It could be an incomplete cleft lip. Okay, things like that. The same thing goes for the palate as well.
Love Without Reason, what was the inspiration? What was the mind behind coming up with this organization to help people with craniofacial deformities?
The motivation behind it was my son, Philip Matthews. My son was born with a lot of deformities. I was told, my wife and I, when we were pregnant with our son, we were told that he's going to be born with a cleft lip and a cleft palate, and that he didn't have a right eye, didn't have a right ear. We were told his jaw was not fully formed. We were told that he had many holes in his heart, that they couldn't count the number of holes. They also told us that he didn't have a stomach. And we were told that because he didn't have a stomach, he would be born dead. And they also told us that my wife, she had a lot of amniotic fluid, excess amniotic fluids in her womb. And they said that if she carries the baby to full term, the baby will die and she will also die. But by the prayers of a lot of people, after a few weeks of in time of intense prayer, when we went back, they found the baby's stomach, and which was a huge miracle. I believe the Lord Jesus did it. And when the miracle happened, we went through the full pregnancy. My wife was safe. The child was born with a lot of deformities. He just like the doctor said, he had a cleft lip and cleft palate, and there was no eye, there was no ear, one eye and one ear. But thank God he was born with a stomach, And so the day after he was born, they told us a part of his brain is missing, called the corpus callosum, which is the information highway between the right and the left brain. And so we were told that he'd be basically a vegetable for the rest of his life. So that's the way we started our journey with our son. And as we went through different stages, it's a very, very long story, but and everything, we have the medical records for all of that. But as we went through that process, we saw that on one side there was the supernatural work where he had many holes in his heart. None of the doctors could fix it. And then after a time of prayer, all the holes were closed by themselves. The part of his brain that was missing is still missing, but he was able to do everything that the doctors said that he could never do. He went from being mentally retarded to a perfectly normal child. Okay, so that was one part of his journey. The other part of his journey was that he started to have surgery after surgery to fix his lip, to fix his palate, to fix an eye. You know, they put a prosthetic eye, a prosthetic ear, you know, so then they had to fix his jaw, and they had to just kind of grow him in a certain way. And so that process taught us one beautiful thing, that is that, you know, there are other children like Philip. And we were fortunate because, like I said, Philip was born in America, and there are certain things that they do for children that are born with deformities on compassionate grounds. So we were fortunate to get some benefits and some, you know, support from the government, and we also were doing well. So our thing at that point was, let us do something to help other children. So that is how we started Love Without Reason, to help another child that may need this help.
Medically, what are some of the forces that could lead to craniofacial deformities? Just perhaps to mention some of them and how they come into being.
Okay, so in this area, they have different kinds of answers. You know, you talk to a panel of doctors, they will all give you different answers, okay? So let me start with my son first. As far as my son is concerned, they did a genetic test on us, they did a DNA test on the parents, and they looked into our family genealogy and history. None of them had any facial deformity. So Philip was our first baby in the entire family history of both of myself and my wife to have had a problem like this. Okay, if you ask different doctors, some will say that it is because of lack of folic acid. Some will say it is because of lack of nutrition or malnourishment, because in poverty-stricken areas you will find many children born with clefts. But then again, you know, in the urban areas, it is easy to identify a cleft child, and most parents that identify children with clefts will abort the babies. But there's no such so-called luxury in the rural areas, in the poverty-ridden areas. So you see a lot of children born with clefts in the poverty-ridden areas and less so in the urban areas. So now, is it because of poverty, or is it because of access to, you know, advanced medical, you know, issues? There are some other doctors that would say that these children are born because of herbal medication given or the wrong medication given. It could possibly be different things like that. I've even had doctors say that it could be because of maybe the chemicals mixed in the waters. So there are so many factors why these children are born like that. But basically, in the womb, the face needs to be formed. It comes from two different angles and it forms. And the non-closure of the face at the end of that term is what causes the cleft. Okay? And why it happens, I don't know if there's a concrete answer. You can never accurately predict if a child will have a cleft or not have a cleft at conception. Okay, my advice is, however the child is born, the child is a gift from God. That child has a purpose. That child has a life. Let's make the best use of it.
What are some of the challenges that people with cleft lips and palates and the general, you know, the craniofacial deformities, what do they undergo in society, and what have you done to help such people?
So there are, for a child from having a cleft lip, Of course, it's the looks, the mental trauma, the mental anguish. There is a lot of bullying going on that can lead to mental trauma and psychological issues. It's a huge problem that they will go through because of the cleft lip. Okay, the cleft palate is another huge area. Some moms will come back home and say, I don't want to look at that child. So that child grows up neglected. The child also grows up isolated and will not be allowed to go to school in many communities. The child cannot mingle socially with other people. So as these things happen, what happens is the child is uneducated, does not have a job, cannot get married, okay, and a burden to the family. And what happens is the family sells these children. And these children are sold for bonded labor. Sometimes they're sold for beggary. They go out on the streets and beg for food. Many of these children are sold for their organs. There's an organ trafficking, organ harvesting industry that is going on. So what happens is they sell them for their hearts, their kidney, their lungs, different parts of their body, because their face is messed up, but the rest of the body is fine. They sell them for their organs. So when we do the surgery, what happens is that child is at less risk for being sold into the organ harvesting or this kind of human trafficking rings. So as soon as the surgery is done, they turn from a curse to a celebrity, basically, from a curse to a blessing. So as soon as they go home, now they become a completely different person. And people all over now love this child. How did this happen? This is a miracle. Things start to change. And there is an opportunity for a new life. So that is what we do. That's what I feel is the most significant part of what Love Without Reason does.
What are the implications of untreated deformities, like for instance the cleft palates and cleft lips?
A child born with a cleft palate is a major problem in terms of feeding. Okay, when a child is fed milk, either breastfed or bottle fed, the milk sometimes will go through the other channels, could enter the lungs, it could cause pneumonia, it would come back through the nose, cause a lot of discomfort. These children will not be able to feed. So a lot of them end up malnourished. Okay, and because they end up malnourished, eventually some of them will die. So that is a significant problem. It's a vicious cycle because they can't feed, they are malnourished, and because they are malnourished, they don't have enough weight, and because they don't have enough weight, they can't get the surgery done, and the cycle continues, you see? So we have to figure out a way to help these children be able to feed. The second major issue with a child with a cleft palate is the speech part. Okay, if a surgery is not done within 1.5 to 2 years' time, the speech muscles that is in the palate will not develop. Okay, and of course there is an opening in the upper roof, and therefore the voice, the sounding board. I'm just using layman's terms because of the audience. The sounding board will not reflect the sound, and therefore the sound is not produced. It goes up through the nose, and there's a hissing sound that comes out. So when the palate is fixed, if it is not done by a good surgeon, a reputed surgeon, somebody who understands what he or she is doing, then the child may never speak. So it has to be done very carefully. Palate surgeries are not easy. Most people don't do palate surgeries because, first of all, there is no market value for that, if you know what I mean. You have a child with a cleft lip and a cleft palate, you take before pictures, after pictures. There is, there's some publicity that can be done with it. But with the palate, nobody does that, so it becomes a major problem. A lot of children have cleft lips repaired, but not their palates. One is there are not enough qualified, really good surgeons who do the cleft palate thing. Second is most organizations don't care. you know. But as far as we are concerned, with Love Without Reason, we focus a lot of functionality. Okay, it is important that these children have a voice. Their voices should be heard, you know. So these are the two major issues that we have with a child with a cleft palate.
After undergoing surgery, of course, we expect post-surgical care. What exactly should one do after surgeries, and what are the consequences of not actually adhering to those measures?
See, after a surgery is done, it's extremely important that the palate is not messed with, like a child putting a finger in the mouth or puncturing the sutures. The other part is that the child should not have solid or semi-solid or even what do you call that, fibrous food that can get lodged in the stitches, that can cause infection and open up this thing. So a parent need to be extremely careful after palate surgery. Okay, so when after the surgery is over, they're only supposed to be on a liquid diet for a certain amount of time till the stitches heal completely. Okay, most parents, they feel sad for their children because the children are crying, right, and they give them something, and then the sutures open up and they're like, oh, the doctors did wrong. No, it's not. It's not. It is a carelessness of the parents. They should never, after the palate surgery is done, they should keep the patient free from solid foods, semi-solid foods. Listen to the instructions of the surgeons. Okay, so that could cause it to open up also. So these are the issues that people have to be very careful about.
How many surgeries should they undergo to actually be completely healed?
We advise the parents that after 6 months you can do your lip surgery. Then they could go in for their palate surgery, but the palate surgery has to be we recommend ideally 1.5 years to 2 years. Okay, after that we let the patients go through speech therapy. They'll have to go through speech therapy. They'll have to help the child, speak, because their mouths are different from the normal mouths, So they have to learn how to twist their tongue. They have to learn how to reproduce sounds, all of that. And then by 8-9 years old, they will start to understand, maybe 5-6 years old, they will start to have to look into orthodontist. They'll have to go in because their teeth would have started to grow, and some tooth would have fallen off, some may still be there. So they'll have to start thinking about braces, maybe a little bit more older. Okay, and then there are cases where the bone in certain places would not have fused, so they'll have to go into a bone graft surgery where they would take bone marrow out and then they would put it in there so that they could fill the gaps. So there are several surgeries that can be done to help bring alignment to your face. It is not just a 1 or 2 surgery thing. It could end up being 8-9 surgeries. In my son's case, it was 25 surgeries.
What are some of the criteria for surgeries, and what's the way forward for those people who actually don't qualify for surgeries?
Safety being our first priority. We want to make sure that the child is of good age, good weight. We make sure that there are no infections. We make sure that their lab results and everything come out correctly. A syndromic child, a child with different other anomalies, we try not to do them in camps, because a camp setting, children, we have to go through these surgeries very quickly. We have a large number of children or adults. We also do adults. We have a large number of people, and we cannot, if it's a syndromic child, it will need a lot more time. So normally we recommend children that are born with different syndromes not to do their surgeries in a camp setting. Okay, they can go to an independent craniofacial surgeon or to an organization that handles those kind of surgeries in a special manner. For those that have not been approved by us because of some of these reasons, I'm not talking about medical reasons, I'm talking about weight, and I'm talking about other infections or something that are temporary, we always find other partners that are also doing surgeries here. Love Without Reason is not the only one doing surgeries in Kenya. There are other organizations, wonderful organizations.
Wind up, what would you tell us? What is the big dream for Love Without Reason? Do you aspire to do more of the cleft palates and lip surgeries, or do you anticipate to begin actually the general craniofacial surgeries?
Just before my son passed away in 2019, before Philip died in 2019, he told me something. He told me and my wife Susan, he told us one thing. He said, "Dad, I want to work until the world is cleft free. I want to work until there are no more sold." These were his statements to us. And that's a huge mandate if you think about it. It's not one country, it's not one specific location. It is the whole world. And we want to do what we can to make the world a cleft-free place.
Thank you very much for your time. We hope this grows to greater heights and keep on